Hello, hello, professionals. My name is Rico Aladdin, and I am the founder of Professional Lunch. Today, we have a very special guest. Dr. Sheri is going to tell us a little bit about herself and what she does. Without any further ado, let her introduce herself. Dr. Sheri. So,
Okay.
why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
All right. Sheri Erickson. I'm a professor of accounting in the Pasika School of Business at Minnesota State University, Moorhead. And I've been teaching for a long time, and I teach a variety of different classes, mainly financial accounting at the principals and the intermediate levels. And then I teach audit as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So has accounting been something that you wanted to do since you were a kid, or were you tapped into it by a teacher or someone that close to you?
That's kind of an interesting question. My mother always said, you'd be a really good teacher. I think you should go into teaching. And what she meant by that was elementary or middle school or high school. And I never had any desire to do that. When I was an accounting major as an undergraduate, it was really the first time I thought, I'd really like to do this. This looks interesting. I think I would be good at it. And I think I would enjoy it. And so after I graduated, I worked as an auditor for a large regional CPA firm. And then I went and got my MBA because you've got to have at least a master's degree to teach at all at the university level. And I kind of got my foot in the door then and really liked it.
Wow.
And I've been at it ever since.
Wow. So how long have you been teaching?
I started 33 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, this is my 34th year.
So do you, outside of teaching, do you work in the community, in the business world?
I don't work, I don't have a practice or anything. Some of the people that I work with have had consulting services. One of our professors has his own tax firm in the Detroit Lakes area. But I have kept busy with things like, I'm on the North Dakota State Board of Accountancy. There are 5 of us, and we basically oversee those licensed to practice accounting. Licensure happens at the state level after you have passed the CPA exam and met the other requirements. So we oversee new applicants. Are they qualified? Do they meet the educational requirements, for example? We swear them in as accounting CPAs once a year at our state convention. Once they have passed, we basically monitor the profession. Sometimes it's from a legislative standpoint. Sometimes it's taking complaints about people practicing as CPAs. So it's kind of like the medical board that way. If someone has a complaint, they can come to our board. We make sure that those who are licensed as CPAs are keeping up with their continuing professional education on a yearly basis and that they're meeting those requirements. So that's kind of what we do. From an educational standpoint, I was recently on the AICPA NASBA Joint Task Force to consider changes to the upcoming CPA exam that will be new and improved, I think, starting January of 2024.
Wow.
So kind of worked on that for all of last year. Deciding what new things need to be tested on, what things can maybe go away that aren't as important to the profession as they used to be. So.
Wow. So do you do that in, how do you do that? Do you work with businesses just to get an idea of what they want out of the profession in order for you to get better ideas on how to shape,
Yeah, that's a really good question. I didn't have to do that, but that was done through the AICPA and through NASBA. We had a lot of people out in the public sector in public accounting that were also part of the task force to get their perspective. And it was very, very helpful.
Very exactly.
Yeah, it really, there's no way that an educator alone would probably bring enough to the table because technology, for one thing, is changing so rapidly.
Wow. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
So how do you, do you like teaching more or do you like this kind of work more?
Oh, I like teaching more. That's why I got into it.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be a college professor unless you really like working with students.
Yes.
And that is the most enjoyable part of what I do.
Wow, very nice. So, what is a day in the classroom like? I mean, I know COVID kind of changed the setting of things, but even before that, if you can make a little comparison then to now and back then when you started teaching.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
what is a day like?
That's a really good question.
Yes.
Well, okay, I'm going to take you back.
Mhm.
In 1987, I didn't have a computer in my
Wow.
office. We did not have email.
Wow. How do you function?
I know. You actually had to call people, meet
Okay.
with them more.
Uh-huh.
If you had a question for a colleague, it was done during business hours.
Mhm.
Email is really made, unfortunately, I think, everybody accessible
Mhm.
24/7.
Absolutely.
And that does create a little bit more stress because the expectation is that even at 9 o'clock at night, you should be checking your email
Yeah.
in case a colleague has a question or someone wants to set a meeting or what have you.
Yeah.
Or a student has a question for that matter. So, it was 1995. This is a good story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So I was at a conference and the speaker was talking about new, and I'm using quotation marks here, new technologies.
Okay.
He asked the group, how many of you have an email account?
Wow.
There were only a couple of people in the group, and this was not made up of educators. It was mostly people in the business world, and only a couple of people out of about 50 raised their hand.
Wow.
And he looked around the room and he said, well, by this fall, all of you will have at least one, and most of you will have 2 email accounts.
Wow.
And he was exactly right.
Yeah.
That's when everything kind of exploded on the college campuses, and the new normal, I guess, came into being. So, of course, there was no course management software where you could not only assign problems online for your students to go through, but all of my books are ebooks now.
Well, yeah.
That was not the case at all back when I started.
Hard case and books like this, we all
all of that's new. None of that existed back then. It's been a somewhat gradual change. When laptops finally became affordable, students started bringing them to class. Pretty soon, the majority of students had one, and now it's just taken for granted that you have that available to you. In our online classes, we do remote testing that's proctored. And of course, none of that existed. Had COVID-19 happened even 10 years ago, I don't know how universities would have been able to survive to handle their students and to provide a quality education.
Exactly.
But technology has made that possible.
So, I mean, we are grateful for technology, even sometimes when we have to complain about it, but we are we are grateful for it. So we already talked about what it is like in a classroom. So what do you remember your first day that you've had to teach a class? Your first day in class as a teacher. What was? I'm curious to know what was like because it's been a while.
It's really nerve-wracking when you're first starting. I think that really until a couple of years ago, even I was always a little nervous on the first day of class because you don't know who's going to be there. How are your students going to seem to react? Do they want to learn? I teach accounting, and when I'm teaching accounting principles, it's mostly non-accounting majors in the class. And a lot of them are scared to be there. So I always feel like it's my job to try to help put them at ease while saying, you could be successful in the class, but you're going to have to study.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't just coast here.
Yeah.
And but so the first time I taught, it was
a little scary.
It's a little scary. You try things and they don't always work, and you try other things.
Absolutely. So. Wow. We're gonna take a little pause here and get some food, order of food, and then we'll be right back with Dr.